Hey Cryptoverse, let's take a look at some charts on Tezos, the latest article for Brave New Coin. So if we compare all the staking coins together, even though the staking mechanisms are slightly different, Tezos leads the market cap and daily transaction volume, and it's kind of at the bottom of the pack on all the other metrics, transactions per day, daily active addresses, and 80% of the Tezos network is locked up in staking. So it kind of makes sense that the on-chain activity is a bit muted, and most of the on-chain activity is actually related to staking rewards and not necessarily, economic activity or economic utility. One thing that's interesting I'll mention is the fees on Lisk are extremely high right now relative to all these other coins. Lisk had a bit of a price spike, and when there's a price spike, there's usually a spike in transactions, and if a chain has poor scaling efficiency, you'll see fees just go through the roof because the chain just can't handle all those transactions at once. If we look at the current value staked, again, across all the staking stuff, Tezos is currently definitely at the high end of that with EOS, Algo, Cosmos, Tron and Dash and Lisk and Waves, all those I compared on the previous chart. I didn't have EOS on there because I can't really get on-chain data that's reliable. Same thing with Algo and Cosmos. Those are a bit newer, so that's harder to find. But just comparing all these again, you can see Tezos has a high value lockup in staking. And looking at the bakeries, which are basically the master nodes, bakeries require 10,000 Tezos to start. They have various efficiency mechanisms between them all. Coinbase currently has most of the exchange-related coins being staked. And if we're talking about decentralization, and if we're comparing proof of work to proof of stake, the proof of work problem is that anyone with money can have a massive economy of scale and buy all these ASICs, and arguably it's easier to have a chain that's more centralized if you have more money in ASICs. And the POS people, the proof of stake people like to argue, well, we can have anybody become a baker and the network will be more decentralized. Currently, 15% of the circulating supply is held on exchange bakeries. And if there's ever a governance issue where the exchanges don't agree with changes or amendments in the network, this can become an issue from the governance side. Now, people can easily just take their coins away if they disagree with, the Coinbase position on an amendment for something and move it somewhere else. But this is always a concern that, there's problems with proof of stake too, is what I'm saying. Like, yes, proof of stake has ASICs and centralization, but proof of stake also has its centralization issues. All right, so if we compare transactions per day, which is the line here, with fees, you can see transactions per day clearly just continuing to rise over the past year. That's bullish for any chain. Again, most of this is probably related to staking and not necessarily economic utility. One thing I don't like to see is that as transactions are rising, fees are kind of rising exponentially. And again, this feeds into the idea that the scaling efficiency may be lacking a little bit on Tezos currently. And if transactions spike, fees may spike even higher. But it's early for Tezos, so I can easily see them adding more efficiencies for transaction scaling, things like that. If we look at NVT, which is a measure of economic utility, and active addresses, we can see that when there was a distribution in the ICO, active addresses went way up. Since then, active addresses have continued to rise, again, speaking to the staking stuff, staking rewards. Now, if we look at economic utility, NVT is an inverse measure of that. So you want this to be as low as possible. You want NVT to be falling. That says economic utility is increasing. If NVT is rising, that says economic utility is decreasing. And another thing I look at is historically, is NVT higher or lower than it was on the chain? And basically, NVT hasn't gotten lower than the ICO distribution. So all this is bullish. You want to see falling over time, but just in the near term, it may say that the market cap isn't supported by the economic utility on the chain, because NVT is rising. Looking at Google Trends, now seeing a Google trend rise to an all-time high for anything is bullish. So it could be Ethereum or Tron or whatever. It just means there's a lot of new people Googling like how to buy Tezos, where to buy Tezos, what is Tezos staking, any of those search metrics are aggregated into this Google trend graphic. So this is extremely bullish for anything. It's good to see that if you're bullish on Tezos. So if we look at some technical analysis for Tezos, I always like to look at the open interest on Bitfinex. Reds are long, shorts, green is longs. The VPVR volume profile of the visible range, which shows the volume at that specific price. An oscillator called RSI, which is a measure of momentum, and the 50 and the 200 EMA, which are red and green lines here. So starting with the open interest, you can see longs and shorts are both at an all-time high. And the interesting part about this is, Tezos went above this to like 360. So there's a potential for a long or a short squeeze here, which just screams volatility in either direction, because if we go down, shorts are going to either increase or longs are going to decrease, and that pushes price down even further. So both sides aren't going to win here. Something's got to give one in one direction or the other. It's prices in price discovery, or which means there's just no previous chart data at the current zone. Now there's other price data for Tezos at these levels on other exchanges, but not on Bitfinex. I think most people are looking at either the Bitfinex or the Coinbase chart, not necessarily the HIT BTC chart, which has more price history. Another thing that pops out to me is RSI. It's in euphoria levels, like 91 or something like that. Historically, definitely near an all-time high. This just says price is extremely overbought. You can see volume also at an all-time high or near all-time high levels. Again, speaking to euphoria. Now, trend overall has been extremely bullish since mid-November. It had the golden cross. It bounced on the 200 EMA here. It bounced on this high volume zone and off it went. Arguably also had this inverted head and shoulders sort of right at 185 or whatever it was, and we've broken above that now. So I can see price coming back to 2 or 250 after it chills out a little bit. It's definitely overbought, definitely in the euphoria zone. Looking at the cloud, again, trend metrics extremely bullish. Above the cloud since mid-November, it had this bearish TK cross followed by a bullish TK cross, which is the most bullish signal in the cloud system. If you get a bull cross above a bull cloud, that just screams continuation. And that matched the inverted head and shoulders resolution as well. So, above 180, it had an entry maybe at 160, something like that, as far as the daily cloud is concerned. And lastly, looking at the Tezos BTC chart, again, open interest on Bitfinex, cloud, 200, RSI, everything's bullish here. It bounced on the 200 in mid-January, let's say. And ever since then, it's just been a straight rocket ship. Right now, as we stand, RSI is a bit blown out, again, much like the XTZ USD pair. So it wouldn't surprise me if this chills a little bit. Shorts are going to come down as they take profit. Longs are kind of near all-time highs, but shouldn't really be affected by any pullbacks. So I can see shorts coming off, longs increasing as price returns to this zone between 25,000 and 30,000 sats.